Now I'm in Tyrrell's wood, also in Norfolk. This is different from the last woodland that I looked at, which had all been planted 28 years ago. This is much, much older. Um, and it typically consists of, well, right in front of me here is hazel coppice. And coppice means that the tree would be chopped down to the ground, probably every 10 or 15 years or 20 years. Traditionally, I'm not sure whether that's happening anymore, but you can see that it's growing up like a big shrub. And what else can we see? We can see holly in front of me as a kind of understory. Um, and But there in the middle of the picture we can see an oak standard, which is traditionally grown for obviously much larger timbers. The coppice would be cut every now and then, and that would introduce small timbers for fence posts and other sort of tools and furniture and what have you. But you have to wait a long time to get really large timbers for building houses or ships in those days. And what's interesting here is we can see one that's been felled, and I don't know why it's been felled. I mean, I don't know whether it died or what happened to it, but apart from the fact that we can see it's just beautifully, it's going to just rot down into the soil and build up the soil again. What's interesting here is we can see the on the tree stump here where it was cut, we can actually get an idea of how old it is. Now the center point of that here is where the original acorn that this grew from germinated and started to grow. And if you look carefully, you can see these rings, right? Light and dark, light and dark, light and dark, light and dark, light and dark. Each one of those represents 1 year's growth, right? So we can see here that we can count the growth rings, because what happens is in the summer and the spring, the tree grows very quickly and makes these wide spurts of growth, increasing the thickness of the trunk. And then in the winter, you get very little growth, and that produces those little light, thin lines as the tree, minimal growth in the winter. Just to save you the effort, because it's pretty well impossible anyway, I've already counted most of them. Now, I've counted the rings from the center point where the tree first started growing here out to this point here. That's 100 growth rings, meaning that the tree had grown out from the center and thickened up all the way up to this thickness at the age of 100 years old. Now, after that, you can see that the growth rings are really, really close together and quite difficult to count, to be honest, even with the naked eye. But I estimate that this growth from here to the outside is probably about 60 years. So when this tree was felled, which is recently, we can see it's quite recent because it really hasn't started rotting down into the soil yet. Of course, I don't know exactly when, but in the last year or two anyway. So when it was felled, it was about 160 or 170 years old. And as you can see, by Hong Kong banyan standards, it's not that huge. I mean, it's not a huge thickness of tree. But anyway, 160, 170 years old, that brings us back to 1870, 1860. So that the acorn would have germinated around that time. So it takes a while to grow a woodland like this. But what a lovely spot. Quercus roba, by the way.